Welcome back to the Japanese History Podcast. Last time we left off at the start of the Nara period. Today we will overview just that period. We'll be taking a zoomed out lightning speed pass by and try not to get stuck in too many details. We'll return and have a look at every minutia later. Why is it called the Nara period? Well, the defining feature of the Nara period is the decision made to establish a permanent capital in Nara. At the time, it was called Heijo-kyo. It remained the capital of Japan for a period of 74 years, with a brief 5-year break from 710 to 784. The Japanese court were at this point maybe the world's biggest fans of China. They chose the location for their capital according to the principles of Feng Shui. To the north are mountains, to the east a river, in the south there is still water. Curiously, the city had no walls. The capital itself was structured after the Chinese capital at the time, Chang'an. It was built in a grid-like pattern with marketplaces to the west and east, and the governmental buildings and the imperial palace in the northernmost part, all according to Feng Shui. The Japanese picked up other things from China at the time. From the capital, orders were sent to send in collections of local history and geography to Nara. This culturally enriched the capital. Japanese was at this time written using Chinese characters. However, it was written phonetically, giving no regard for the actual meaning of the character. The Japanese also started to mint coins. However, they quickly fell out of favor because of lack of use in the Japanese economy. Seemingly committed to copy China in every last detail, Japan also had a rapidly growing population. Japan at the start of the Nara period had a population of 5 million. Compared to the world abroad, that's roughly 8% of China's 60 million population, or about half of Western Europe's population at the same time. This all put a lot of pressure on the government. The old Ritsuryo system was not enough to keep up with feeding all these people. The government needed more food. The problem was solved by reforming the taxation of new land with a new law. According to this law, whoever tamed new land for the use of agriculture was given ownership of that land. This is important. Rich nobles were now able to, independently of the imperial government, expand their land. This also rang true for the Buddhist and the Shinto clergy. The priesthood and nobility were more or less the only people rich enough for land reclamation. The ordinary farmer had to make do what he was allotted by the Ritsuryo. This was the year 743. The emperor at that time was Emperor Shomu. Let's dig into the evolving role of the emperor and Shomu specifically. The emperor had been a figurehead and a religious leader before, but as power had been centralizing, so had the power of the court. As Japan became more and more Sinified, that is, became more and more Chinese, there became an apparent need for a proper son of heaven at the center of power. However, the Japanese were not Chinese, so the concept needed to be tweaked to fit in with the local custom. Let us compare the machinations of emperorship and its ideological reasoning. In China, the emperor ruled through something called the Mandate of Heaven. It was given to him and his dynasty from the Chinese concept of heaven, and as such could also be lost. When the dynasty lost its mandate, usually through poor rulership and mismanagement of the country, the people were morally obliged to revolt and restore the mandate by instating a different dynasty. That was the only way to save China from destruction via natural disasters, famine, and the like, typical consequences of losing the mandate. Now, the Japanese emperor wasn't sold on this concept of losing the mandate. After all, his family were literally divine, directly descended from the gods, and his people believed this. No need to disturb the mind of the hoi polloi with thoughts of complex moral obligations with the state and Confucian ideology of a rightful ruler. The emperor of Japan instead relied on the good old trusty folk religion of Shinto. His mandate was the divine mandate, and from now on it was to pass from father to son. This meant that women could no longer hold the title. A nice little bonus for all the men throughout the land, as this solidified the Chinese influence of blatant misogyny. Not a win for the fairy sex. To put their minds at ease, the reason for this was explained in some handy myths. The main one goes like this. After Izanami and Izanagi had created Japan, they wandered its land. When Izanami saw Izanagi, she exclaimed, "What a beautiful man!" And Izanagi responded, "What a beautiful woman!" They joined in marriage, and Izanami bore forth a child. The child, however, was foul and deformed, and it was set adrift amidst the reeds. They returned to the heavens and asked for aid. They were then told the reason for their misfortune was that Izanami, the woman, had spoken first. Brother and sister once more ascended to the islands of their make and redid their first meeting. This time the man speaks first, and all is well. The meaning of the legend is clear. Women, the jig is up, your time is over. A more historical explanation of the diminishing role of women is twofold. Firstly, the intense influence of the male-dominant Chinese culture, and secondly, the ever-growing Buddhist clergy, which only allowed for men to take charge. As we know, Japan at this time was a Buddhist and Shinto country. Emperor Shomu was a devout Buddhist who started to build temples and support the Buddhist clergy in Nara. During Shomu's time, Japan was going through a bit of a rough patch. The system for land usage was, as previously mentioned, not perfect, and this culminated in a famine topped off with an outbreak of smallpox. Now this was no joke. This would claim the life of a full third of the Japanese population through the years 735 to 736. Now Shomu wasn't completely unschooled in Confucianism, and as we just learned, disaster like this was a sign of losing the mandate. However, the Japanese mandate was eternally granted to the imperial family. So what to do? Shomu saw only one solution: build more temples and appease the Buddhist gods. Shomu proclaimed that the emperor is not only the servant of the Buddhist gods, but also their protector, and the realm can only enjoy peace if the emperor is Buddhist. The power of the clergy was of course expanded, and the many monasteries and temples started to compete with each other. New Buddhist sects sprung up around the capital. The power of the Buddhist clergy would soon become overwhelming, and it was decided to move the capital to Nagaoka, and then shortly thereafter to Heian, which sets us up nicely for the start of the Heian period, next episode's topic. Let's wrap things up by having a look at the expanding borders of Japan. During the Nara period, Kyushu, the large island in the south, was wrestled away from the local Hayato people and brought under the command of the Imperial Japanese. The Nara period was also the start of the so-called 38 Years' War against the Emishi to the north. Speaking of the north, from now on the Ainu is going to take a backseat. They will continue to live their lives relatively undisturbed, mainly on the island now called Hokkaido. So that's it for now. Next time we'll be digging into the Heian period, and we might get to see the famous Japanese samurai take their first baby steps. Looking forward to providing you handsome listeners with more content in the next episode.